Oh, fuck. Not what I wanted. Hello, dreamers. Let me find... And get that as low as it'll go. Study novel. Hello, dreamers. And welcome to the stream. I gotta change this. I'm sorry. My scenes menu is screwed up. Hello, Carousel Can. It's been a while, Carousel Can. Indeed, we're moving to earlier Sunday streams, so you may see us some more. We're doing a read through of any tabletop RPGs, as I recall. Work on some of those, so perhaps I even got a little more. We're going to go with adding a source that is a browser source, and we are going to add in this file directly as the source. What do you know, it'll load. But it actually won't load properly. We're just tend to live on the right side of the screen. So, hello. We're doing a little read through of an indie tabletop role-playing game. That's when you forget to mute the site. And it is called I Have the High Ground by Jess Levine, also known as Jess from Online. This is the inaugural episode of a little something I'm planning to do, so there may be initial kinks to work out. I apologize for that. I need to come in here to Diesel Shot. Tweeting, Facebook posting, Mastodoning, blue skying, fucking everything. I believe Jess has requested a Twitter link, so I will go get that. Boop. Boop. I apologize, I cannot see chat right now, but I will shortly. Let me move this shit to the side. And hello, Jess from Online, greetings. Yes, so I apologize that some of this is going to be a little amateur hour. This is a first time on the setup. Sunday wound up a little more packed than expected, but 13 minutes deep and we are here. And I'm going to just pass this image around to a few places and let them know I'm live. As we get started here, we are reading through, of course, Jess from Online's lovely I Have the High Ground. And we're going to read not necessarily as I would normally, but as some people do, which is a strict linear front to back. First of all, beautiful layout. I believe in the credits we do have the individual who handled that. We have an interior and cover artist, Ezra Rose, game design consultant, Sata, editor, Will Jobst, layout designer, Vin Tanner. I think everyone here, but especially Jess Levine, whose game design we are going to be discussing today in constructive fashion, have done wonderfully. I like the little touch in the art of the mixed styles of architecture and garb. It's giving you, it's giving 80s in a very good way because of the mix of a real sword, bandolier, cape, visor, a flamberge, which I actually first took to be like a beam saber of some sort due to the disruption. Because I Have the High Ground, although there's an obvious reference, is actually for all sorts of duels. And spoiler, Jess encourages us to take an expansive view. My camera isn't on, so you cannot see me gesticulate. My God, what horrors. Yeah, I'm drying my hair. And I will take this encouragement to view it expansively 1000%. I believe that there is a going live on RT. Yep. I'm going to say live right now. And it's going to be very annoying because Discord always is with Diesel Shot links. So I will post it because you do not get deboosted for posting your link directly in this environment. And yes, she'll show us out. So normally I would do this while the going live screen was up that you've all very patiently waited through, but I find myself fumbling. And has my Discord's gone out yet? Yes, it has. No, don't tell me that it didn't actually change the name. No, it did. It is out. The 1 year anniversary in 3 days. Yes, it's a lovely game. It's out. And if you're looking for a collaborative 2-player game, I would highly recommend. It is also worth noting that if you're not, that's a great question, K9, and I believe Itch might be the main place to get it, but we have Just From Online here with us who correct me on that. In future, I will have all these links ready to go so that people can check out the games. Yeah, here it is on Itch. Yes, thank you, Jess. And allow me, I will pin that message in chat. In future, I will have commands for them. But absolutely, it's worth checking out. And how do I make you last way longer? Yeah, okay. Infinite Pin. Ooh, a physical edition Indie Press Revolution. All right, so with all that said and all that done, there are more Discords where I could share it, but I think I'm just going to do one more so that we can move forward into the broadcast proper. Apologies again, Jess, for it's been a bit of a slower start stream, but we're getting to the good of the matter, which is this game. Other tabletop RPGs, TTRPGs. It's worth noting we're taking a perspective which states that we're moving in this series away from any sort of like, oh well, I'm not partial to two-player cloud role. Maybe one is or is not partial towards two-player cloud role-playing games. The point here being we evaluate the design from the perspective that this is a good idea. And we're talking about the execution, the ideas, and how they mesh. And obviously, perfect neutrality is a fantasy, right? You cannot fully remove yourself from your perspective, but you can make an honest effort to take things as they are. So, with no further ado, I might have messed it up by trying to fit the page. Let's come in. Credits, table of contents. Now, we are going to read everything, although I do think that in 99% of cases, my eyes have gone to the table of contents, and I am looking at stuff like character, play, background, and glossing over a lot. I find interesting that first game is an introduction, so I might look at that. But typically, I'm not going to. This is a pretty good table of contents. Table of contents content we're going to talk about perhaps more after we've seen what's in it. We have a great perspective. Credits. I have The High Ground 2022 by Jess Levine. Illustrations by Ezra Rose. Again, they're lovely. I Have the High Ground is written and designed by creator Jess Levine. Her other games can be found on justfromonline.itch.io. which is also a great place to go. You can also find her on Twitter as Jess from Online, which can I just say, good handle. If you're looking to find someone online and you think, where do I find Jess? Common name. Well, Jess from Online in particular. Strong. I have never forgotten that handle. People have forgotten my handles and I've forgotten my own handle. But the following contributors have also been essential to the development of this game and Zine. Zine. So as we mentioned earlier, interior and cover artist Ezra Rose, game consultant Sata, layout designer Vin Tanner, editor Will Jobst. Thank you to Sata for design direction on the descriptor and circumstances and mechanics. Thank you to B. Frudson for additional editing. Thank you to both Sata and Rhiannon for critical development playtesting. This game wouldn't be what it is without your feedback and ideas. Thank you to those of our incredible playtesters and their important feedback. Kai, Des, Dora, Emmanuel, Geostationary, HP, Jay, Joshua, Jules, June, Kirby, Krista, Kristen, Liam, Lizzie, Marlena, Ren, Riley, Naomi, and Rocky, Nicola, Nth Snowflake, Philip, Sadie, Jorid, Ted, Trevor, and Vin. Apologies if I got anyone's name wrong. Indeed. Oh, you recently ran Going Rogue, another lovely game from this creator. It will acquire a, I believe, Galactic 2E background that I presently lack, but not to say we're not going to get around to it. But yes, this is quite the designer. This game is dedicated to sword lesbians and homosexual rivals everywhere. We love that dedication. And thank you for all the fantastic contributors to our crowdfunder rewards and stretch goals, including Bridget Renew, Faye, Rhiannon, Naomi, and Daly, Riley Uthal, Sardia, Patratham, I apologize if I got that wrong, and Sata. Thank you to our backers, especially generous individuals without whom this game would not have been possible. Alexander Van Chestine, Betty Goldstein, Claire Ross, Corey Gunnar, Jean R.D. Allen, Jeff Stormer, Lucy Suddenly, Mint Thompson, Nora Chernoff, Patrick Van Brunt, Scott Goldstein, Sean Kinsey. Very good. So, we have gotten to the part that I would, if I were just casually going to actually read first, the table of contents. Introduction, page 1. First game, page 2. Important note, after rules, summary, and introduction, every first page of a chapter begins on the same page as the first entry. It could be because the intros are short, or it could be because the introduction is its own logical standalone, and the rules summary is its own logical standalone, followed by under bullet, first game, and safety. Given the economy of space here working out basically perfectly, I can see why any extraneous bullet point would be removed, and this doesn't look like much, but is in fact a triumph of layout design. But let's get into the game design. It's what we're here for. I have the high ground, a collaborative, two-player dueling game of banter, posturing, and capes. We've seen that in the cover. We've seen that inside. We are getting into this game. We've never played this game before. We don't know anything about this game. We clear our brain of any foreknowledge. And we come in here and say, let's face it, dueling is sexy. But do you know what's sexier than combat? That's slower, higher tension duel that occurs before any damage is done, before any blow is even struck. The duel of wit and word, of melodramatic motion and threatening maneuvers. I Have the High Ground is a short collaborative storytelling game for two players about that kind of duel. Characters can use this opportunity to flaunt their bravado, or to perform subtle acts that leave a dramatic and imposing quiet in their wake. Your game is not an action-packed fight to the death, though that might occur in the battle which follows your duel, but rather a portrayal of the smoldering tension between two individuals about to risk their pride, their reputation, or even their lives. I Have the High Ground also encourages players to ask, what exactly is a duel? Think expansively about what could be framed as dueling. This is wonderful. Imagine a race in Fast and Furious. Imagine a game of chicken in which two people are just hurtling towards each other, seeing who will veer away first. There are many. Imagine two politicians who won't back down, and there are about to be global consequences. Anything could be a duel. Anything. It is the drama between two people and the violence in the many forms that it takes that is building between them. It's wonderful if you're knights, fencers, or Jedi with your blades crossed for sport or mortal combat. But what if you're hackers? Of course, there are examples right after I just went on that rant. But what if you're hackers trying to speedily exploit your way into control of a contested server? What if you're a murderer and the aggrieved loved one avenging their victim? What if you're assassins and ex-girlfriends? Or you're in a boxing match, or a bar fight, or even just a school talent show? Pick your weapons, push the limits, and wherever justifiable, flourish your capes. Right? Well, I will say immediately, what I'm struck with here from the introduction, the promise that we've been given inherently from this game is, this should be great to put into another role-playing game, and this would be great as its own standalone event. There is a lot of room to flourish and grow. It is a distant cousin to a world-building game where one can create a campaign setting or scenario wherein to later theoretically place adventures for another role-playing game. This is sort of a side or middle grade to it, as well as its own standalone game, as I have received it. Which is say, yeah, a fight might happen afterwards. And I'm like, yeah, it might. The game isn't telling me that it's going to have mechanics for that. It's telling me this is not that part of the duel. Maybe it happens during the fighting, but this is another aspect of the duel. And I think that in that way, it frames itself and positions itself quite well. Yeah, like what if you run a game of Quiet Year and then you have an adventure in a Quiet Year world? Charismatic Canine. Or use Microscope. Or use... What's that system I always used in college and we never actually did play it? We have a map somewhere with it. I digress. There's lots of world-building exercises one can find. But this is much more tighter scope focus, but a cousin to that. A cousin, I would say. Materials. I have the high ground. Make sure you have. This is good. This is good in the same way that was a role-playing game is good, because a lot of people just might not know. And I would glaze over this. But what about the person who said, I like the idea of a game about flourishing capes, and they've never played one of these sorts of games before? This is a nice inclusion, and with 15 pages in the PDF, there's a tight economy here, and it gets half a page. That's a decision. That's a commitment, and I appreciate it. Why? Quiet Year is a great game from Avery Alder. It tells of a struggling post-apocalyptic community. It does. I've never personally played it, but it is well regarded. Thank you for watering the lead, Jess. And generally, pretty cool idea that I appreciate. So, we want to make sure we have 1 to 2 hours in which to play, or 2 or 3 hours for new players. That's interesting. This is, by my reckon, the full length of an average role-playing game where one would say, do anything. Engage in combat, go on adventures, go to a baking competition, really any sort of role-playing game which involves multiple people and happens episodically or as a one-shot. 2 hours is around the minimum. Say 1 hour for more experiential game, but this game is predicting 1 to 2 and baking in double time for new players. I actually don't think about that often, how session length could potentially change with new players, but from my experience in board games, doubling the time rings true. Printed character and background sheets or paper on which to write your own. Something to write with or a document to type into. 2 6-sided dice. I appreciate the acknowledgement that digital is a fast-growing, dare I say it, dominant medium. 2 6-sided dice. 9, I have the high ground tokens with thrust, parry, feint, penalty, and priority written on them. Are 9 slips of paper. In that case, write priority on 1 slip of paper and the remaining words on 2 slips of paper. Online players simply need a platform on which send simultaneous messages. This is incredibly pedantic, and I will avoid similar points in future. But I will say, we have explicit or digital, we have explicit or digital, or physical or digital, and then we have 6-sided dice. Because the presumption here is, well, if you don't have them, you can use an online die roll or a digital dice roller. But that same presumption could hang over these. I wonder if a singular high line point of digital equivalent for these could do the job, although, or it could just say, or dice rolling app. Again, this is incredibly fringe and people are going to figure it out. What if we are steel manning it against someone who arrives and truly never even heard of a role-playing game, or, like, oh, I don't have dice, I can't play. I don't think this theoretical person exists, but I don't think this theoretical person is necessarily played I have the high ground. However, I do think that theoretically exists, and maybe a point towards a dice roller app or an online dice roller wouldn't go amiss with the space that's available. But again, that's a more pedantic point here that we're going to avoid. In general, I just felt that it stands out only because such a good job has been done of pointing to the digital alternative, and the idea here is clearly we want to let people know, hey, you don't need the tokens, you can write on paper. Hey, you could just do it online. And I think that that's great. I think it's great that they were doing that. So I felt like the game was coming from that perspective. First game. If this is your first game of I Have the High Ground, there are a few extra steps that will make it easier to play. Very good. I don't write games with this section, and maybe I should, because a lot of people are going to have their first session, and the first session is going to be harder. While it's recommended that both players familiarize themselves by reading the rulebook, these guidelines will be especially helpful if one player has read the rules and the other one is learning the game throughout play. Again, holds true for a lot of party games and board games that I have played, and is honestly an idea that's just useful for game design in general that I think that should be brought over to role-playing games more. Obviously, there is the implicit when there's a dungeon master or what have you, oh, they've read the rules. But a collaborative two-player game, it's worth noting, yeah, it's probably going to go faster if one person at least has gone through this, and you don't just both arrive and say, it's a book, we're both playing, right? And that's when play is supposed to begin. In your first game, you should read certain sections of the rulebook aloud during play. For each new type of turn win, you encounter in play, read the description of that type of win and at least one of the associated examples aloud to help players understand what that turn's narration should look like. In a collaborative game and a strongly narrative game, I feel this advice in particular is very useful. Because you want to give people an impression, because a lot of people are going to be coming from, shall we say, other role-playing games, and the other side of the coin that we've just discussed with theoretical players is someone might have a game informed more by a system where you kick in the door and kill people, and what a turn looks like, and what the resolution of a turn looks like there, I'm guessing is going to be a bit different than in a game where we seek ever the opportunity to twirl our cape. Do the same when you reach the resolution. Finally, turn to page 3 and read the brief rules summary aloud together before beginning play. Good advice, important to keep people on the same table. Rules summary. I Have the High Ground is a short collaborative game for 2 players. It tells the story of the duel of posture and wit that occurs between 2 people before the battle itself begins. Your game is not an action-packed fight to death, but a portrayal of the smoldering tension between 2 individuals that address their pride, their reputation, or even their lives. Priority acts as a tiebreaker if both players choose the same standard move. The player with priority wins. Priority is exchanged back and forth each turn. The player with the best score on the Cape rubric on page 9 can choose to begin play with priority or pick the first advantage. I appreciate there's a Cape rubric. That's fun. If they choose advantage, their opponent gets priority on the first turn. So, immediately, we are drawn to this lovely water cycle of hearts and swords. When you open this page, when you scroll to this page in the spread, I'm going to guess that this is a fairly important central mechanic akin to a Fire Emblem weapon table or rock, paper, scissors, because it would appear that there is a triumvirate of trumps. Good to get that in early and often, and good to have an engaging graphic. So, priority. Tiebreaker. We've already gone over the tiebreaker, I believe. Yeah, that's where we're looking. Turns. Each turn, players select one of 3 standard moves. Thrust, feint, parry, or once per game, a penalty move. The winner scores a point and consults pages 17 and 19 for explanation of how their victory affects narration. Thrust beats feint, indicating that the victor made an offensive move. Feint beats parry, indicating that the victor offered provocation or bait and the loser took it. Parry beats thrust, indicating the loser offered an aggressive thrust, which the victor struck aside to make a powerful counterattack. Apologies for reading that word wrong 3 times in a row. Penalty moves are acts of severe disrespect that each player can make once per game. Results are based on a 2d6 die roll. I see. I like it. We have a game with set results, a tiebreaker if you give the same thing, and
a once per game variable outcome result. I have also never heard the term Cape Rubric before, Charismatic K9. Drawing your weapon. On the turn that you reach 8 points, your opponent must draw their weapon if they have not already done so. The consequence of drawing a weapon are purely narrative, but should be very tense and dramatic. I also love the part of the fight where they draw the weapon and design mechanics around that moment. So, I feel kindred soul in this game. Good shit. The resolution. When you reach 9 points, you enter the resolution, and your opponent loses their patience. They strike the first blow, ending the game and beginning the battle which follows. The winner retains the right to block, parry, or dodge that blow. So, this is where the posturing ends and the fight begins earnestly, and that's where the game ends. And I think that this is, again, we've been essentially promised this is about the duel before, and we have it borne out in the mechanics. This is where the duel ends. Additionally, you bait them into striking the first blow and beginning the battle, and I think that's important. That, in a sense, like, you lose not by winding up losing the duel like itself, but by being the one who initiates the violence. I feel that this speaks very much to dramatic posturing and the sorts of stories that feature it. And I like that it is beginning to inform us implicitly the perspective of the game. Because there are a lot of people who would say, no, you wanna strike first. Han Solo shoots first, yada yada. Hello there. We're here, we are always queer, and we are just beginning to get into I Have the High Ground. Pinned is the itch.io link if you care to check it out. I Have the High Ground. Character creation lend themselves naturally towards flirting and romance. Safety, an important section, and the only part of the intro that was on the talk, I believe, under rule summary. So there's a priority here. Safety is not a higher bullet item than priority turns or the resolution, but safety is listed in the talk, again emphasizing this is important. Before beginning your game, it's recommended that you discuss any topics that should be handled with care or avoided altogether. In particular, some options in I Have the High Ground character creation lend themselves naturally towards flirting and romance, and it is often worth discussing whether that is a theme you're comfortable exploring together in your game. Very good. Good shit. Something I feel people miss is that, yes, Han Solo shoots first, but it's established that that isn't something a good character does. At least introduced, Han's never portrayed as a hero, he's a smuggler. Yeah, absolutely. And I feel that him doing it is kind of a feature of his character. So in a sense, right, I would say by this game's, maybe just as an opinion on this, by this game's standards, Greedo won the duel before. When he gunpoint sits Han down and that talks him up, he's like, oh, I'm going to enjoy this. You fucked around too much. In a sense, does Han lose his patience or does Han pick his moment? I think that is a question that there is an implicit stance taken on in this text. Not necessarily about that fight in particular, but duels in general. And the progression of the posturing duel. Obviously, this isn't the Star Wars example duel that we're referencing, but background. Begin by deciding the background for your duel. Background includes a genre, stakes, history, descriptors, exposition, and environment. We're setting it all up, all of which will be covered in this section. Okay, both players must agree on background elements. If an option contains the word or, only one of the options may be chosen. Ooh. Tip. The process of creating the background is collaborative. You're encouraged to offer ways to counterpose your characters and intertwine your stories. Because it was the moral victory, they killed me, their old friend, and felt awful. Correct. Fun fact, I had an Isekai game where the last event of the game was me getting shot in the chest and dying in one shot. Because it was the moral victory, they killed me, their old friend, and felt awful. See, yeah, I think that is a beautiful aspect of... I think there's a design ideology which would state you you can't make presumptions about how the victory works out, and you have to leave it to the players, and many collaborative games would take that stance. But just because this game is collaborative and narrative in any way, it doesn't mean that it lacks some moorings. And the question is, what's important to firm up, and what is important to keep loose? And I do think the loser strikes first is implicit to the game, and I think that a game of Hitge is informed by the fact that the loser attacks, and I think that it's an important part of the identity, as I have 5 pages deep counting cover absorbed it thus far. We're not out of the woods yet. Process is collaborative. You're encouraged to offer ways to counterpose your characters and intertwine your stories. It's okay for the background section to take the form of a conversation in which the individual elements are completed out of order as they come up in conversation. Important permission. Many people, my people, first instinct would be to checklist. But, noting that a conversation, well, does that just mean we're not role-playing? In which individual elements are completed out of order as they come from conversation. Important that it's more about we're talking. And the rules are for inspiration, not limitation. We have yet another expansive, bold text informing us to branch out. But if you decide to complete the background section in non-standard order, it's to recommend you complete the character section in the listed order, as the early elements of the character section mechanically affect the later elements. This is a good thing to inform people of. You want to let them, and the italics, the bold section here, important. You wouldn't want to read this and fuck off. Putting the but right after with the emphasis is important. And there is something where you should put this in linear order. The rest of it, If you're using I have the high ground to simulate a duel between existing characters in another game, it may be easiest to skip history and descriptors, but it's recommended that you do complete the other background elements to ensure you begin your duel on clear, established grounds. Important, this game is aware of the fact that it will be a game, often played within a game. That's an obvious use that we've seen reading early in the rules. We have guidance on it. Under the tips section. Very nice. Someone who says, I don't know, tips? Fucking hop over here to the pretty words. The stakes. But someone who's like, a tip, you say? They've been well informed. I appreciate also the delineation into an italicized zone. This is essentially what would be a sidebar in another form of role-playing book, that under this very svelte, and can I just say the distressing on this fucking broken screen? Oh god, it's so beautiful. Under this layout format, good and clever way to do it. Genre. What setting does your duel occur in? Choose one option together. I like that they go with a font that looks like it could be a Knights of the Old Republic menu for the direction. Examples might include fantasy, spacefaring, science fiction, or modern supernatural, but can be broad, creative as you can imagine. So it's not saying pick one of 3 and they have a mechanical effect. It's just saying genre. Pick the genre. Implicitly, genre is important. Genre is important enough for 1/8 of a page. Really more of a third when you consider the layout space. But it doesn't. This is a instance where the game chooses to be loose. We're going to come to a tighter bottleneck here, I feel. Where the stakes are viewed. Choose one option together. Important note, together. Stakes describe the consequences of the battle, which will follow your duel of wit and posture. It assists you as players in setting the gravity of the situation. In I Have the High Ground, stakes are broken down into 3 broad categories, each named for a different weight of weapon in competitive fencing. Cute, nice, appreciated. I was never a fencer, my brother was, so these terms are vaguely familiar. I think it's important to delineate stakes. There's a difference between when you're killing someone and when you're having a bit of a row. Foil low stakes, a public fencing match between rivals, a championship boxing match, or simply a bar fight. The battle following this duel ends with both players walking away alive and no one else will die as a consequence of its outcome. We're establishing a no fatality stakes. This is something that a lot of stories fuck up. For example, the superhero genre is a lot lower fatality in general than you would expect, and they go out of their way to explain this or to wrap around it. Whereas if you are looking at your average space opera. It's much more, and then 10,000 people died. And then the battle continued because that was just one ship. So I think that genre followed by stakes, correct order. Also, convenient layout order. I will harp less on the layout, but it flows nice. It flows nice. We have to hand it to them, folks. We do. You will note also the text width is varying. I think that's fine. I like a small it feels like it's zooming in. It feels like it's telling me, hey, look at this. Stakes describe the consequences of the battle, which will follow your duel of wit and posture, and assist you as players in saying the guided situation. And I have the high ground. Stakes are broken down into 3 broad categories, each named for different weight of weapon and competitive fencing. Let's go. Low stakes. Foil, which is the public match between rivals, championship boxing match, simple bar fight. Nobody dies. This duel may be a matter of pride. Make no mistake, however, pride is not a small feeling. These duels are as intense and intimate as any other. Lean into the drama. We're giving advice. We're emphasizing they're important. We're talking about the story you want to tell in an elevated fashion while categorizing it. Again, even when the game narrows, it's a bottle. There are narrower parts, there are wider parts. It's like a weird science beaker set that you come through and pop out of steam when someone attacks, really. This is a Rube Goldberg water machine, but Rube Goldberg machines infamously have no or little point, whereas there's great point to this. And there's an economy to it. So as we continue our tight flow, we come to the middle passage. We're not using that phrase. We come to the middle here. Saber, meaningful stakes. A duel between knights which determines the fate of their lords. A quest for mortal vengeance in the name of a slain lover, or a desperate melee between foot soldiers in the trenches of a larger fight. The battle following this duel is likely to be lethal, either for the participant or those they fight for. Indicating that it might not be them who dies, but life is on the line. And love? Maybe not always on time. So we understand that the gloves are off, but it's not necessarily an epic scale of at the fore, right? These are the people in the trenches. These are the people with a personal stake. And it's meaningful. Low, meaningful, towering. They don't say low, medium, high. They say low, meaningful, towering. Meaningful here doesn't downgrade pride, but it does serve as an emphasis step for those who are thinking, oh yeah, well, if nobody dies, where's the drama? Which is a thing lots of people think. Cough, cough. Game of Thrones did well for a reason. And I think that this respects that while delineating respect to the other forms as well. I'm going to fuck this up even though it took 7 years of French. Épée. Towering stakes. A melee between opposing generals. A Jedi and a Sith clashing lightsabers amidst a ground battle. 2 hackers vying for control of the life support system. We bring it back to a non-literal fight in a very lethal way. The battle following this duel will be lethal, either for the business or those they are fighting to protect, or both. In fact, entire battles might be won or lost in the outcome of this fight. Towering is meaningful ++, essentially. But it's at the fore. It's at the head. We use the Jedi analogy here not just because of the obvious inspiration, but because, if your Sith Lord falls in the ground battle, maybe good logistics and training and morale will come through for you and you'll still defeat the Republic. Well, that ain't what we see most of the time in those scenarios, and we're evoking a common scenario while not dictating how it will go. History. Who are your characters to each other? This is likely the first time you'll be establishing concrete backstory for your characters. Likely, not certain. It's okay to move forward, then revisit this question to add or change an option. Good, inspiration can strike at any time. However, it's recommended to make at least one selection up front, as this will help narrow the vision of your characters. A narrowing to be he's a nudge in the right direction. This comes from the perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Jess, but I come from the perspective of someone who's used this system a bit, who's played this kind of game a bit, and has advice to interweave into their writing. It's not constantly an advice sidebar, although sometimes it is. But the text of the game isn't just literal roll 2d6. And for some designers and some perspectives, they'd say this is fluff, this is unnecessary, yada yada. This is a core part of the game. This is a core part of the experience. This is a core piece of guidance in how you experience this game. And in indie games, it is very important to offer guidance on intended experience, on possible experience. To be open to the fact that people will ignore this or brush over it, and to have it there, because the reality is so many people are going to play another game, is try and ram some bit of you into that. And most danger perhaps comes when I have the high ground flirts with an I have the high ground scenario with another game. I could run I have the high ground in Worlds Without Number, a D20 based game of adventure between two characters, right? And there'd be a temptation to treat this more like Worlds Without Number treats the game, in a more OSR-y fashion. And there's room for that. There's room for that in the rule of slight implied setting of World Without Number, but literal setting in the case of Worlds Without Number, and Godbound implied for Swin and others. A ton of the tips are from playtesting. Playtest is incredibly valuable, and I think that I speak personally. My games only get made because I have playtesters, because I have friends who play the games with me, because I have a wet T-shirt, because I have white hair, because I just got out of the shower, because I wanted to be shaved before we started the stream. And absolutely, they're vital. And just having friends, having someone to play the game with, it energizes me. And I don't know Jess's creative process, but knowing here, we're very lucky to have just in the chat that a lot of this comes from playtesting. Lurb, I know, and that's because I have been a lazy boy. But we're absolutely going to do some of... Lurb makes lovely point crawls and adventures, and it's like systems for doing those things in, shall we say, vending machine punk worlds, Lurb. And absolutely, and I'm looking forward to playing... It's a complicated conversation now, but I'm looking forward to playing more indie RPGs. As an indie RPG designer, it's what I feel called towards, just broadly speaking. And yeah, that is an issue though if you have no one to play with, if you have no playtesters, if your gaming group isn't as willing to entertain it, or if you come up with an idea like I did with Red Knight that some members just aren't energized for. It can be rough. I imagine, correct me if I'm wrong here, that it might have been easier with I Have the High Ground, because you can be like, hey, you want to play this? Okay, just us necessary. Although I'm sure it's also just as important or more important to have two brand new players do this without Jess in the room and report back. And from Sata, the design consultant, who is incredible at identifying friction points during pain points and prompting me to make guidance like that. Magnifique. And we see here what this testifies is, and why it's important, that just gives credit where it's due to all these people involved. Games are a clouded process. Game design is a clouded process. No game designer is truly an island. I have designed as an island before. Those things didn't get finished, and if I played them right now, I would see lots of obvious flaws. When you build your flying machine, you need to try and put it in the air. About half my playtesting had me in it, and the other half were blind playtests. Very nice, Jess. Much better ratios than I have historically hit. Of course, we all, as Lurb points out, Lurb being an artiste and game designer in our community, we all come from a different perspective, from a different position, and we use what we have when we think of our resources. And maybe we don't have a group that we can put this in front of. Maybe we don't have a group that will run this without us there. But we emphasize what we do have in our relationship with game design. And even if you're a total island and you're listening to this and for some reason, unfortunately, you have no one at all to talk to about game design, in which case, join my Discord. Join the Jesus Side Discord. I'll talk to you about game design. Hit me up. Theorycraft, you just at me in general. There is something that you can do to emphasize, even if you're somebody who reads these books in a theoretical way for your own joy. You can hold them against other books. But it's wonderful to have people, and I do believe you can, in theory, design an island. I have great respect for you who do. I'd love to read your game if you do. But again, as we move through here, just know, this game had playtesting. This game had lots of people involved, and it's still Jess's game, but just gives credit where due to all these people who were involved. And I do think it's in the quality and amount of guidance, it shows that Sata was there, and that 50% of the playtests were blind playtests or playtests without Jess present. I think that contributed. Yeah, I feel that. I've been running the majority of playtests for my system. I sent it off the first blind test. Charismatic canine. That's lovely. Yeah. I believe you've shown it to me before. Or told me about it at least. I'll have to take a closer look in future. And you could be, we could read through it on this show if you'd like at some point. But yeah, I'm always eager to get that kind of feedback. I love watching Twitch streams of people who aren't me run Change Stars. Also, the joy of knowing someone else plays the game. And that's why I do it. Choose one or two options together. Betrayal, former allies, rivals, unrequited love, arch nemesis, ex-lovers, revenge, mentor and mentee, mutual respect, or unrequited respect. Strangers on the battlefield. Tight. Fucking tight. I won't say this covers every possible scenario, but I will say I think this hits good. Hits fucking good. And as long as you're willing to extrude the analogy, strangers on the battlefield could be hackers that encounter on the net, street racers who pull upon each other on the road, people who are the last two left in a karate melee where there's like a free-for-all where everyone's fighting and there's two people left in a tournament style. So this is available. These come up across all three stakes, in my opinion, and it requires some extrapolation if it's not literal violence, but not much. Not much, and we have guidance throughout the text. So, again, we're hitting good. Descriptors. Who are your characters? Descriptors establish a basic idea of their personalities and aesthetics. They ensure your characters have similarities while still being set up as foils to each other. Select from the table below. Together pick one of the opposites that describe your characters. This is one of the only sections of the book that I read before starting the stream. I wanted to come in fresh, tabula rasa, to take things as they appeared so that part of the analysis could be, okay, have we gotten to that part yet? And this book has been great about that. But whenever you're designing something, you never want to introduce a concept or an idea or a proper noun before it's been defined. Sometimes I'm bad about that and I'll put it right after. But we're batting above average, well above average. I'd say perfect for I Have the High Ground right now. But this also stood on its own. If you ripped this out and said, hello, you two characters in this game, I want to juxtapose you. Use just this. If I take a fucking screenshot of descriptors right now and I post it in a Discord and I say, do this for your two favorite fictional characters, do this for you, for your OC and their OC, do this for your role-playing game characters in the party, you could do it. And it would be a meaningful exercise. There's an atomization of the design here that is magnifique. Now, that's all atomized, but I'll gush less. Cruel versus empathetic, vengeful versus forgiving, passionate versus stoic, flamboyant versus subtle, young versus wizened, impulsive versus tactical. And of course, there are those who will say, my Marine is impulsive and tactical, my Bard is subtly flamboyant, my character is wise beyond their years. I don't take this, based on the expansive text earlier, the point is to have a dichotomy, however you view the dichotomy. This is a tightening, but it's a good one. And it's encouraging to people to think in dichotomies, even if these aren't the dichotomies you use. But it's important that they provided a ready-made list, because this would be a bit much to pull from the ether. Earnest versus ironic, imposing versus coy. Also, I feel like if you could grab all of this and look at any pacing that happens in, say, the new She-Ra between Catra and Adora, or any of the villains, and apply this shit. And I think that it speaks to the dramatic quality of the game that I'm thinking of works of fiction that this applies to very readily. And they're not even explicitly the works of fiction I know it's referencing. Guard versus an open book, debonair versus utilitarian, reputable versus underestimated. That's interesting. Reputable isn't counterposed to disreputable, which is where my lizard brain would have taken it. but rather underestimated. Like, oh, you have the big reputation, but this person's the underdog. Again, we're speaking in this proposed dichotomy to the game, to the ideas of the game, to the ideals of the game, to the ideology of the game. In a good way, I like it. Brutish versus cunning. I almost read that as British versus cunning. I shout out to my cunning British friends, but that was funny. Vulgar versus tactful. Famous versus infamous. Wordy versus concise. Careful versus reckless. Articulate versus quiet. I do ask myself, how great of a gap is there between wordy and concise? But I would say there's a difference between wordy and articulate, and there's a difference between concise and quiet. You can quietly brood, or you can have a very laconic, no barley grain. You know what I'm saying? Like, usually you look at the character, like, basically every, like, badass line that someone tries to take out of context from a comic or something is just, like, Batman, like, responding to a monologue with, like, one word. You know what I'm saying? You like to look at the game? It's a tight game. I like to look at the game both in the sense of it looks fun to play from the game's perspective, and lovely layout design. Yeah, it's pinned in the chat, the itch link. What brings the two of you to this particular battlefield? Expedition answer together. Collaborative. This is where the series of events leading up to this particular duel are settled, though those events may shift later. Aha. Cough, cough, Mustafar. In the process of establishing these events, the backstory between your characters might also become more clearly defined. It says defined, I'm just being silly. Here you might decide that your fugitive character has finally been located by their opponent, a bounty hunter. You might have already decided that you're opposing generals, but here you conclude that your characters chose to duel in place of a larger battle, and begin play by departing from your respective legions to approach each other alone. So the exposition bit is important to say, yeah, you know who they are. Now you're figuring out what's combined you, and logically it's okay and where. Well, and some people would say place is one entity. Some games would make place one entity. I'd make place one entity. I'm trying not to overly discuss my own style here, but I do this to juxtapose a positive way to which I have the high ground. I think this is good. I think this is important. It's almost how it's happening is almost important. It's why it's happening, and it sets the dramatic lens that we gaze. That we think of this as the zoom in. This is the pan in. This is enhance. Enhance. 20 degrees to the right. And what do we see 20 degrees to the right? We see environment. Where does your duel take place? Choose one adjective from the 3 different or statements to describe the environment of your duel. I like this. Because at first I was like, oh, lava world, haha. But you don't normally... You could have a boxing match at Lava World where Lava World is like a volcano, the name of the gym or something. But we were adjectival here because we can expand or contract these as necessary. What does windy mean in cyberspace? Maybe there's a lot of emails coming by. I don't know. You can have an isolated race. You can have a surrounded race. It can be on a track. It can have people around cheering. And sure, it can be desolate, middle of nowhere, back road, like the races people like to have in my neighborhood when I lived in a back road where bitches love to speed. Tennessee living, y'all. So dangerous or secure, chaotic or serene, precarious or stable, surrounded or isolated, cramped or spacious, still or windy, ancient or state-of-the-art, dilapidated or pristine, boiling or freezing, dim or bright. Having a cyber duel in the old X-51 Soviet interchange program for financial systems versus, the ultra-sleek, super modern 2020X Digitodome. That's a different hacking duel. Feels different, looks different, narrated different, even if symbolically you can see the cyberspace. We have the character from the intro with their visor off and the cape visible. Next, you will establish details about your individual characters, while the descriptions of your characters are up to you. The mechanics of I have the high ground character creation require you to create your character simultaneously and interactively. Interesting similarities and differences between them. And of course, you're finding the differences if these are two pre-existing characters. Are you wearing a cape? And if so, what does it look like? Players have the right to decide the answer in secret, as their cape choice will affect Who picks first advantage? Oh. See page 10. And who receives priority on the first turn? See page 14. Alternatively, I like that it's not like a secret grading where like one side is objectively dicked, because I think you want priority because it's going to win ties, we know. The advantage, I believe, is who goes first. It's something. As you can see, I have a great memory. That seems flying around everywhere in the requisite green LO advantage superior fashion. Nice. Yeah. If their ops wear a cape, they must describe it in detail. They must. I like it. It's like the cape is never just I put on my robe and wizard hat. It's always like, here is my cape. It flutters sanguine in the wind. After unfurling your capes and revealing your... Additionally, what is a cape? I'm thinking expansively about what is a cape. I'm thinking about your, V2 persona while you're hacking. I'm thinking about your car's hood ornament and paint job. But let's see. After unfurling your capes in this piece, I've already been encouraged to think expansively. Buy this book early and often. After unfurling your capes and revealing the descriptions, evaluate your capes against the rubric below. Oh. Show you mine. Begin with number 1. In the case of a tie, proceed to the next number until one player wins. Alright, so... Oh. And 4 and 5 are important. Because I was like, what if they both opted not to wear the cape? These are both the cape. Oh, owns a cape. If you pre-read the cape rubric, I could see a... There are stories about people who in role-playing games want to have the tallest character. And, he's tall, he towers over. And I was like, well, my character is also really tall. He towers is the average height of this. And they go back and forth until, like, the whole party is, like, 9 foot something gangly. So I wonder, is there a similar mechanically driven, and the cape nearly cuts the floor ification one could engage if someone really wanted advantage. I don't think that's in the spirit of this game, and I doubt that people who are playing it earnestly would engage in that. But people who play it often enough might begin to think about it. Begin with number 1. In the case of a tie, proceed to the next number until one player wins. The winner may choose to pick during one of 2 sections later in the game. They may either be the first to choose from the list of advantages in the following section, or they may be the first to choose to begin the game with priority. Whichever first the winner does not select, the loser receives. That's interesting. I picks advantage and who receives priority. I thought it was going to be winner advantage, loser priority. But it is one decision. In one actual play, it took place in cyberspace, and someone had a cape that streamed green text down at Matrix style. Chef's kiss. We're thinking expansively. So you get whatever one they don't want. I'm assuming that the first turn advantage counter, more or less, I'm guessing, although it feels like a simultaneous resolution game. But, it is, to the best of my knowledge. But, it's like, okay, well, one of these choices is going to privilege one player or the other. But there's another one that counterbalances it. So, you feel like you've won something, but the other side, the loser, has received something. I do think it's important to note that we do just use straight up the loser here. Which is a choice that the game is making inherently, and it's saying, keeps rule. And, sometimes you and your comrades, whip out your cape and you see who's longer. And, no judgment. No judgment. I like that. Advantages. In what way does your character have an upper hand in the battle which will follow your duel? In most cases, these advantages do not give a mechanical edge, but rather provide topics for your character to leverage when flaunting their superiority. If the player with the better result on the cape rubric chooses the advantage, they first pick from the adjacent options. If not, their opponents pick first. Alternately, choosing until you both have 2. All right. So, desperation is an advantage. I know that too well. This is a good or, anonymity or comprehensive intel on your opponent because, like, you know, I already know you at every move, and I am a virtual ghost, are very adjacent. They're very adjacent in terms of their dramatic place in a fight, a conflict, shall we say. A duel, as envisioned by this game. Those are both sides of an or statement count as one option. Good to know, because, yeah, take it. This is this is like a 2 lines and change that has to exist for basically one of them. I'm guessing I'm guessing these were once 2 and became 1, and this rule had to be made to slide in there because sometimes it just happens like that. You know what I mean? It's like the asterisk on the items table, and there's only 1 asterisk. So, advantages: the high ground, familiar territory, to be taller than your opponent. Interesting. This is one case where we have a wobble. We'll come back to it. A more accomplished record, superior fashion, superior weaponry. The element of surprise, opponent in compromising situation. Which is an advantage you pick that impacts the opponent. I like that. Reinforcements on the way. Extensive training for this particular fight. To be your opponent's exact type. An honest, more comprehensive intel on your opponent. Desperation. Some of these are stretches for certain expansive conceptions, but in the literal fight sense, you want to be taller than your opponent because, broadly speaking, assuming human proportions, this will give you superior reach. And in a melee fight, you have the length of your weapon and the length of your arm. In a duel with analogous or broadly analogous weaponry, every inch of arm matters. It is an advantage. Because it gives you... I mean, it puts the thing you control closer to the bits of them you're trying to poke. But height can be a liability in other arenas, such as wrestling. So I suppose you could invert it in that sense and say, symbolically, you are taller by being the short king, or short monarch of any sort. Also, refashion. It's important. Winning this game is about looking better in a duel of banter and posture. Fashion is a great way to do that. When it comes to height, I was thinking about how intimidating it looks to tower over someone. Oh, my brain went to the wrong place. No, you're right. And a lot of this is about, like, you know, like you're very anonymous. Huh? Well, yeah, it means they don't know your moves, but also it means it's just like, who is that mysterious stranger? Cape fluttering in the wind at the far end of the desert lane. You know? Your Wild West duel. Mysterious stranger. Big brain, Jess. And desperation, just good advantage. So, I do not yet know what mechanically the advantage does, but I know I've picked them. And in a way, I think that's good. Advantage has come several times, so I might just be forgetting, but I think it's good that we're thinking about this conceptually. It is a collaborative storytelling game. Before we're picking from an itemized mechanical list. What is your character's clothing like? Establish 2 or more details. You may specify items that you are wearing or provide adjectives that describe your overall fashion. Like 2 or more of your clothing items. Yeah. Fashion is important. You think fashion is your friend, my friend, but in fact, fashion is danger. So yeah, 2 or more details. I think that's good. You could make a table here, but I think leaving it open-ended was the choice. Weapon. What's your character's primary weapon? Choose your weapon. Specify and describe it. It must be appropriately matched to the power level of your opponent's weapon. If one player with advantage superior weaponry, there must be a meaningful difference in power level. And the player with advantage reserves the right to ask their opponent to change their weapon in some way. While the relative strength of your weapon will not have the mechanical outcome of your duel, it provides an advantage to the character with the superior weaponry might choose to flaunt through dialogue or emotion. Very nice. I would be remiss not to note, if superior weaponry advantage did not exist, it should be a two-line section, which speaks to the weight that superior weaponry can possibly have if it is present or not, and to the weight the advantages are given. Some of these aspects are, we don't know how important they're going to be. We're not being told straight up. We get this weapon section, we know, oh, superior weaponry can play a role in a significant fashion. Use now. Inventory, what interesting items you're carrying on your person. Establish 2. Good fashion accessories, items utilitarian value. We leave with the fashion. Again, danger. Items utilitarian value is a boot knife or armored pauldron. Turns to your past, even your opponent's past, if they agree. 2 or more items on your person. Gouda like the cheese. Circumstances. Establish circumstances of your encounter. For example, an elevator door might open, or one character might turn on a corner. So this is a further zoom on the narration of our. I did go back and forth on cutting superior weaponry for that reason. Cutting unique mechanic for opponent in a compromised situation is because it wasn't worth the space and complication. As a designer, I feel your pain. I feel it in a deep way. Because the reality of how these games exist versus the ethereal draw of more and of describing and of putting in the book. There's the front of we don't have the room for it, or it feels lopsided. And there is the version of you could have a rule for everything, and maybe if you have a purely digital product and the layout for whatever reasons isn't going to change that much over it. But like, you know, in play, do you want infinite numbers of, and look at this, and look at this, and look at this? I think this game is going for lightweight, but it is meaningful lightweight. Verging it points into like the middle ground. So, you see why? I will say this. The fact that we have superior weaponry here and a discussion of superior weaponry helps inform how we might handle compromising situation. It gives us in a game that encourages us to think expansively. It does give us an example. I'm not proposing this because I think it's the right thing to do, but because it is an alternative path, and I've been there with does this get cut, does this not? Weapon is just this, and maybe inventory has get punted and it fucks up their shit, but this section as like optional or potential or handling advantages. And it says in subsequent sections it is important to factor in advantages, for example. And it runs down superior weaponry. And that might even put someone towards it even more, but that's not a space, it's a little more formalized. The game is already. This is the sort of game that says think expansively and then says something like superior weaponry. And if you're having a cheerleader competition as your duel, you know, obviously it's not you brought the Glock with the Stendo mag, right? We're trusting that the player is thinking expansively. We've encouraged them to do so extensively. They're playing a collaborative 2-player storytelling game about Cape flourishing duels. We imagine that they have self-selected as someone who's gonna be using that noodle expansively, and to a degree that's a fringe burn we take. By which I mean you can't design the perfect set of instructions for everyone. Someone's going to fuck something up. You can't describe literally like, and then if you never turn over your hand, the dice won't fall out and roll. So do that. Like, yeah, you know, it's a French thing. Circumstances. Establish circumstances of your encounter. We already have the locationality, the narration of the rival, but the circumstances, the dramatic door open, turning the corner in eye contact, or one character purposely approach the other from behind, causing them to turn when they hear footsteps. From there, read the play section on page 14, choose a move. Ooh. Have we been shoots and laddered? Determine how the initial contact resolves based on the result of these moves. If you're not unsure of what move to start with, you may use one of the pre-established example openings. How the players are encouraged to design their own opening circumstances and begin to play with the original moves if they feel comfortable doing so. Standard move, 70 to 19. For each opening, you'll be asked to choose together if you want to roll a die or answer questions. Good. Nice. Good. If you're feeling unsure of how to improvise a beginning, or feel that you won't understand your character's approach or motivations until you're immersed in the narrative, or if you simply want to introduce an interesting random element to your game. Important to throw this out. And you might think someone will think of this themselves per the earliest expansive thinking, but in any game, there's a degree of a la carte. And if you're a rulesy person who isn't a la carte, telling you this is an a la carte section and you may have different reasons for doing it or not is also important. This is worthwhile lines, particularly in a game, tight game. 15, absolutely godly that they got this into 15 pages with this economy of space. Godly that we're only on page 8 of it. Magnifique. These are a lot of lines they're spending and they're worth it. If you are feeling unsure of how to improvise a beginning, or if you feel you won't understand your character's approach or motivations until you're immersed in the narrative, or if you simply want to introduce an interesting random element to your game, you may wish to choose to roll a die. On the other end, if you're looking to help interrogate your character's approach so that you can work on how to choose your own move, or if you prefer not to introduce randomness into your game, it may you choose to wish to answer the provided questions instead. Although, if you do not wish to introduce randomness into your game, I wonder if there's a way to avoid the 2d6 roll that is triggered by the, what's the faux pas move called? The penalty move. I like how I didn't remember it was called penalty and I called it the faux pas. So, on 1 or a 2, 3 or a 6. 2, 3, 2, 3. Oh, 1, 2. 3. I'm going to just read this in linear order because my eyes are bouncing around. It's important to note. Read the play section, choose a move. We're just straight told, go to page 14. But if you're feeling unsure, I'm letting us know that this is part of the. Let me check the table of contents and be sure I'm not speaking out of my ass. Yeah. This is part of CareGen and an extension of your first game. Let's jump ahead just to see what it would be like. Bam. Play. The section describes how the mechanics of Eye of the High Ground help you tell the story of your duel, of posture and bravado. The intense confrontation that comes before the battle, as always, these are guide rails, not chains, and meant to provide you with structure and inspiration for telling the story that you and your opponent have in your hearts. Moves. Eye of the High Ground is played in turns until one player reaches 9 points, winning the game and beginning the resolution. I do find it fascinating that in a game that is in many ways, I would say conceptually loose, that someone might one would not stereotype this as a game where you accrue points and win. That is not. If I walked up to a game designer or a random person and said, yo, I got this cool tabletop role-playing game, and it's about collaboratively creating a duel, and not like the fighting part, but like the posturing part. Very, very collaborative, very expansively minded, sort of lighter on the rules. How do you think you win? They would be like, oh, well, you win the two of you decide. Like, no, actually, it's when you it's when you get the high score, it's when you get 9 points. And I like it. I think that this game has its own distinct identity that exists beyond such dichotomies, and I would encourage anyone to take this as an example of you don't have to pour in anyone's mold. You don't gotta play by nobody else's rules. Design from the heart, and you will make a more interesting, engaging game. Now, there's anything wrong with that alternative that I alluded to. We're not here to shit on anyone, but I think it's a dope game, and I think it's doing what it came here to do. We bump back. We're reading the linear order. We have the challenge, the chance encounter, the trap, which honestly, the trap feels like a spiritual successor. All of these tables only go 1 through 3. I'm sure I'm missing something. This feels like a compromising situation extension. And in part, I could see sitting down at a table and someone being like, we already have the trap default scenario, Lee. And going, no, it's different. It's different. I need a compromise situation. No. And then eventually being convinced to cut it. I have no idea if that's even remotely involved, but that's immediately what I thought of. The challenge. The opening. This opening designates one character as the challenger and the other as the person they challenged. Bitch slap with the glove. When the narrative of the challenge chooses the location of the duel and the challenger approaches them there, out of character, players should review the options they selected during the background section and decide on compelling time and location for the challenge. The player who starts without priority is the challenger, while the player with priority is the challenged. Choose together whether you want to roll a die or answer questions. On a 1 to 2, the challenger opens aggressively and winning the turn by thrusting into their opponent's failed feint. Go to thrust win. On 36, the challenged was prepared and parries the challenger's thrust to win the turn. Go to parry win. The challenger, how do you approach the situation? Read the options silently to yourself and choose one in secret. The challenged, how do you approach the situation? Read the options silently to yourself and choose one in secret. I see. These are not roll tables. That was gamer brain from other products. It was implicit teaching that anytime I see a numbered list, that's a roll table or a rollable table. And these are, spoiler warnings, rollable tables. You just roll a d3 by dividing a d6 roll, which is what I've begun to suspect might be the case. So if you roll a 1 or a 2, it's a 1. 3 or a 4, it's a 2. 5 or a 6, it's a 3. The winning situation will determine the narrative resolution. So we're going to go here. I try to capitalize on momentum, barreling in with an insult. Thrust. I try to capitalize on my preparation, demonstrating my strength in calling attention to my advantageous position. Ho, you approaching me, etc., etc. Also, can I just say, how did JoJo's Bizarre Adventures not occur to me this entire time? But now it's like, what fight doesn't begin with or and contain multiple instances of, including faction related. I have the high grounding, truly. I try to take advantage of my position as the challenger, baiting my opponent into overreaction into fear or frustration with the threat I present. Feint. I attempt to bait the challenger into overreaction by drawing attention to the challenger's childish eagerness or their impudence in challenging me, which is actually what Dio would do, yes. Parry. I try to approach the well-prepared challenger carefully and stoically, refusing to rise to any provocation. Parry. I attempt to set up my defenses carefully, preparing for a comeback, any sort of instant posturing. The winner's selection will determine how the narrative resolves. Read aloud the matching win type on pages 17-19 for further description. I like that it's very appropriate that in a duel, the first move is the opening scenario is treated a little different than the little repartee, even though this isn't literally killing each other part of the duel. The chance encounter. I imagine it was hard to narrow these down to 3. The challenge, the chance encounter, the trap. I think they're all good. I think they're all very strong archetypes. I would struggle to get it down to 3. This opening designates one player as the encounter and the other as someone they encountered by chance. Within the narrative, their meeting place is accidental and the encounter stumbles unexpectedly into view of the encountered, which is a challenge of how do you divide these two if it's just they bump into each other. You know, I'm running late for school. And they've got the fucking toast in their mouth and they run into them and they fall down. It's all very romantic. Out of character, players should review the options they selected during the background section to decide on compelling time and location for the encounter. The player who starts without priority is the encounterer, while the player with the priority is the encountered. Choose together whether you want to roll dice or answer questions. On 1 to 2, the encounter sees their opponent stumble, believes they have caught them off guard, thrusting quickly and aggressively, but the encounter recovers faster than expected. Parry and win turn. Parry win. On 3 to 6, the encounter has caught their opponent off guard, thrusting their opponent's slow feint and hitting them before they can react. To win the turn, go to thrust win. Page 17. This was actually the last thing added to the game, and the only section not present at all in the first complete draft. I rarely use it except in playtests. I know how I want to start my games, but players new to story games were struggling on turn 1, so Zadai helped prompt me to write this for them. Brilliant. One of those mechanics that doesn't exist at all until the last minute that kind of brings it together. No, absolutely. You can kind of tell, and that it's a shoot and ladder where it's like, ayo, skip these couple pages. Unless... But it's important to have it here. I think it's good. I think it's good. I think that Sata, again, clutch. And this is part of why no designer is an island. And despite the fact that to me this feels very integral, even though I've been told to overlook it, basically. I can see how it's later edition, but I can also begin to even struggle to conceive of the game without it. It's when you know you've got... a real team behind you. So, the encounterer. How do you approach a situation? Read the options silently to yourself and choose one in secret. Thrust. I try to think on my feet and make a brash and threatening move before my opponent can seize the opportunity to take advantage of the surprise. If you're the encounterer, thrusting, I try to capitalize on my opponent's stumble and demonstrate my strength by calling attention to their advantage, their misstep that gives me. Feint. I try to take advantage of my seemingly disadvantageous position, call attention to my own stumble, and when my opponent revels in it, I reveal that I am more prepared than expected. Call an ambulance, whips out gun, but not for me. I try to bait my opponent into an intense, vulnerable reaction by laughing at their stumble. Haha. 3. Parry. I try to recover and put my guard up after my opponent gloats at my stumble. I was say goads. Gloats at my stumble. I reveal that I had secretly carried the upper hand all along. Haha, you fool. How do I take advantage of the time my opponent's stumble gives me to think and plan a clever response to any first action they might take? Push up glasses, shine moment. The winners, we're shooting to 17-19. The trap. This opening designates one character, the trapper, and to someone they've trapped. Within the narrative, the trapper chooses the location, tricks the trapped into getting the duel at a disadvantage. Out of characters, players should review the options they selected during the background section to decide on compelling time and location of the trap. The player who starts without priority is the trapped, while the player who starts with priority is the trapper. Choose together whether you want to roll a die or answer the questions. 1, 2, trapped recovers quickly. 3 to 6. So, we weighted in favor of the initializer. Wait, do it, yes. 1 to 2 versus 3 to 6. 2 out of 6, 4 out of 6. Basically, I want to do odds. The trap recovers quickly, parrying the trapper's thrust and winning the turn through the quick-witted comeback or a stoked display of nerve. On 3 to 6, the trap succeeds. The trapper feints. Their opponent's parry, baiting vulnerability out of the trap by leading them into an embarrassing situation or brain. Sensitivity discovered by the trapper prior to their duel. The trapped. How do you approach a situation? Read the options silently to yourself and choose one in secret. And this is the distaff counterparts. Distaff's the wrong word to use here because but these are the counterparts. The trapped, the trapper, thrust. I try to strike quickly and, in a metaphorical sense, through posture and wit, hit them before they can execute their trap. I try to follow through my trap, seizing the opportunity for insult or posturing that is set up for me. Feint. I try to take advantage of my seemingly disadvantaged position by calling attention to the trap, and then revealing that I am more prepared than previously expected. I try to bait my opponent into intense, vulnerable reaction by highlighting how easily they fell for my trap. For example, I easily fell for a trap. I trusted a PDF page counter. We're at page 14, but at page 9. I forgot we're reading the spreads version. This isn't a 15-page game. Apologies to anybody who thought that's really short in a negative sense about this game because of that. But if you thought about it in a positive sense, That's because I'm a genius marketer. Parry. I try to take advantage of how the trap allowed me to prepare. See? Anticipating the possible response to the trap while before and preparing a counter for each one. Anticipate the trap. Okay, plan I've debated all along. Yeah. Play. We've come back to the play section. Let's get into moves. I have the high ground. It's played in turns until one player reaches 9 points, winning the game, beginning the resolution. Each turn, secretly choose to thrust, feint, parry, or once per game, make a penalty move. I wonder what happens if you both penalty move. It goes to priority, I believe. Thrust beats feint. Feint beats parry, and parry beats thrust. Tail as well as time. Rock, paper, scissors mechanics fucking work. RTS games use them for a reason. Spearman meets cavalry. Swordsman beats spearman. Cavalry beats swordsman. Fucking done. You got a triangle. It's solid. It works. You add some spice. Penalty move. They can only use it once. Are they going to use it? They haven't used theirs yet. I can use it. Da, da, da. The winner of the turn scores 1 point, and the players narrate the winning move and its consequences before proceeding to the next turn. I don't see a way to lose points, which is important because it means the duel is always escalating. It's really guaranteed to, I guess, unless there's a way to get bonus points, have a minimum of 9 rounds. Which they said 1 to 2 hours or 3 to 4 for new players. And that's proper role-playing game session length right there. We have a sidebar. It's a formal sidebar with bullet points. Players don't need to choose a move with their exact narration planned, and in fact, probably shouldn't. Because they don't know the opponent's move. A player's choice of move indicates an approach to the next exchange, and the exact form it takes should be determined by the result of the turn. Yeah, what are they going to do next? When you choose next, you should probably somehow flow from what you happened last time. This is a game about rigid fluidity, and I think that happens with the flow and the length and such. Both what I mean by this is the game says, go nuts, okay, pick from these lists. You can be expansive about it, you can probably substitute your own, but here's what I'm putting in front of you. Out and in, out and in. And here again, saying, think of anything, think of the move, keep it fluid, probably shouldn't, which is a pretty strong phrase to put in a role-playing game, actually. And then go. Come up with it. It's still collaborative, you're still telling a story, but there's a fair bit of bone to the game here that you catch your teeth on. You can't just slide through it. It's not just a narrative writing exercise, basically. Not that this couldn't be one, but I would place this under the game category more. The winner of the turn scores 1 point, and then players narrate the winning move and its consequences before proceeding to the next turn. If a player reaches 9 points, the game moves immediately to the resolution. The losing character can wait no longer and attempts to land the first blow against their opponent, ending your game if I have the high ground, beginning the battle that follows. Priority. Similar to the identically named rules in fencing, if both players choose the same standard move, victory goes to the player with priority. Priority is exchanged after every turn. Track priority by passing a token back and forth, keeping a written log of priority. Are you a fencer? Priority is exchanged after every turn. I'm spoiled with the design of the chat. Priority is exchanged after every turn. Track priority by passing a token back and forth, keeping a log written of priority each round, or any method you can think of. Priority helps break ties and keep the game tense and dynamic. Likely to victory at every turn. Do we explicitly talk about what happens if both sides choose the penalty move? Because I know that's a dice roll resolution. But if both of them choose it, does the dice roll go differently? They both roll the dice? Oh, perhaps not. I have not. I watched videos including fencing rules to make this design. Then I ran it by Friends for Fence. Nice. I mean, hey. I've never fought in a war, but I've talked to people who have, and that has helped do design. I'm not a medical professional, but I've talked to people who are. That's helped design how I do some health systems. Sure, it's a thought in my mind that's occurred to me, and I'm like, I wonder if that's going to be. Feels like the sort of thing this game might or might not have rules for. And the fact that it does tells us something about the game. That there is structure here. The structure is not an imposing one, but that is present. That I find this pleasing. Player reaches 9 points. We've done that. Priority. We've done that. Priority exchanges after every turn. You trade the token. It breaks ties. It shows. It has the flow of. I mean, basically, if we're discounting penalty moves, this isn't the real statistical probability, but it generates a feeling that you have a 1/3 chance to win, because experientially to you, one of your 3 choices will win where it would have lost. It's actually like take 3, choose 1 twice. I don't have a TI-84 on hand, and I'm not great at math, but they teach you this in algebra if you're paying attention. Priority is procedural and does not indicate an advantage in the narrative. Oh, simply settles ties. I was thinking of like, oh, they have the priority is always swooping. The camera's always putting one person in the forefield and the other in the back. And now I've been corrected about that assumption, because one might assume it. The winning move is always what determines the shape of the narrative in that turn. Again, this is a moment where the game steps out and says, no, this is how it works. I could ignore that, but the game has an inherent ideology to it, an inherent sense. I think that's nice. I think that if this game was not, it's gentle but it's bold, and if it wasn't willing to be this bold, I don't think it could hold up like it holds up. It is a sandcastle, but it is a sandcastle made with those like plastic pre-shaped things, but like in a very elegant and elongated shape. Choosing moves. Perfect pose. Big Pat energy. For those of you who know Artiste and my co-developer of Change Stars. She's like, we have Pat recreate that pose sometime. Choosing the moves. Choose your move secretly. Well, you may make a strategic choice by attempting to guess the opposing player's move. It is recommended you aim for narrative satisfaction. Just ask yourself, what approach would my character take given this emotion and the situation at the moment? Aim for narrative satisfaction. Yeah. This is a game of rock, paper, scissors with a twist. If you just hand someone that, and then you personally, because obviously just played it a lot personally, has just his own experiences, didn't need the prompts that have been provided, didn't really think of those sections. But I'm gonna guess that Jess doesn't really need to be told this, but a lot of people do. And there are rulesy people for whom this is permission, and there are rulesy people for whom they're like, this is bullshit, but again, if they still want to use the game, they can, and do whatever they want. What approach would my character take given the current emotion and the situation and the movement? And I would argue a more rules-minded person who's just choosing these based on psychology, and a person choosing them more based on the roleplay, are having a valid, fun game together. And that's bridging an important gap. Giving you bannings what to do. Players reveal their moves simultaneously. In person, players can accomplish this by hiding tokens or slips of paper in their fists. They can also keep written lists. Online players should type them into a chat box. The player that has priority counts down to 3. In the countdown, players should share their moves to each other. Good formalization, and yeah, how I do it when we like voting and shit. Again, important inclusion that recognizes these games are often played digitally, despite the fact that it has fun physical aspects. Priority on the first turn. If the player with the highest score of the Cape rubric chooses to begin play with priority, that player's priority on the first turn. If the winner chose to pick the first advantage, their opponent has priority on the first turn. The last word. The winner of the turn reserves the right to final narration for that turn. Not required to speak last, but their opponent must allow it if the winner asks. Good note. Feels a bit TV writing. In not a bad way. Because TV writing, if you think about it, you've got a week or so to cook up
drama, and you got minutes, maybe, to cook up this drama, you probably want to go for the shorter form. You know, people write movie scripts for fucking years sometimes. You ain't got years. You can riff off them. Probably not going to make something that's just like it. His mechanical focus on the narrative and dramatic outcomes. So we have another tips section. We've had tips before. This is a whole page with a sidebar above tips. Let's read the sidebar first because it's first. Oh, it stands alone. Play the Godsmack song. Unit's mechanical focus on narrative and dramatic outcomes, not combat damage or skill checks. Eye of the High Ground plays differently from many traditional role-playing games. Talks about something that we've been alluding to here a bit. These tips anticipate some of the problems and possibilities that might arise from transition to this style of game. As you can see, this is a thing that we think about as indie designers in this industry and in this sphere, and it's a good section to include. And I can earlier tell they were writing with it in mind. If this is your first time playing, it's recommended that you read them in order to understand how to execute the rules of I Have the High Ground. Come with the best possible experience. Even role players' experience with this type of game may benefit from the game-specific perspectives. These tips bring to I Have the High Ground. This is the, hey, I know you think you don't need to read this tip section, but actually, read the fucking tip section. Is what the latter half of this breaks down to. Said in a way the game would say it in a polite sense. You know, a Borg, right, of the Borg variety would probably have like a big neon, like, hey, fucker, read this, or rest in piss, or whatever. I mean, they wouldn't say that, but point is, handled differently for different game, but still, I think it's getting the point across in their mode. Your goal is to tell a story narratively satisfying to the viewer, not the character. Sometimes the victory may not be visible to the victorious character, but instead the players are aware that inside that the loser is ashamed. It may be helpful for the players to share their intent. The winner might say that they hope to embarrass the loser to provoke a reaction, or simply demonstrate the prowess assisting the loser and offering a satisfying response. The suggested narration from these some types of turn wins might be played out closely resembles the narration of other types of turn wins. This does not require you to change your narration. As always, the suggested narration is intended as inspiration. Shouldn't be treated as a requirement. The same lines delivered from a different tone could be interpreted as either loss or victory. For example, a character might daunt, earlier running with the Rat Pack, now my runaway lieutenant to reduce a company of street criminals. In response, the victorious might be, they've been kind to me, unlike you, which the loser helps insult. Conversely, an opponent who lost might shout, they've been kind to me, unlike you, at which point the victorious might be laughs. Yeah. It's at Capture Adora, fucking She-Ra setup 1000% here is like all I can think of. Obviously there are other inspirations, but very strong point that like you can say this from a point of victory depending on how it's framed and thought of, and you can say this like as a cope, and it's worth noting that, you know, it'll hit different. This is a game of emotional combat in a way. We talk about social combat a lot, and social combat mechanics, and diplomacy, and how like rolling to persuade the king he should actually, mortgage the palace and trust you with all of the money. Why did rolling a high enough number make him do that? But here, we have a more grounded and interpretive example of an emotional combat, if you will. If the description of a turn win feels some characteristics for your character, that character wouldn't take an aggressive action here. Consider the possibility that your action is misinterpreted in some way. While some physical actions narrated for standard moves might be aggressive, they should never escalate to action of violence. That's reserved for the resolution. Good point. And everything that's theoretically aggressive is said that if you're not sure how an exchange would end, and you're able to pause in the middle of a dramatic moment and proceed to the next turn, solve an exchange based on the winning move from that turn. So, like, we know that parry goes to the thrust, but then we know that both of them follow up with a feint. And maybe when we know that, we narrate better. If necessary, you may even revise the ending of the previous move to make position flow better. Yeah. Permission to retcon. This, I feel, pushes the outer bounds of the permissiveness and openness presented in this game, but it doesn't go beyond them. And that's important, because it means that this section and this rule, which some will not like, Blades in the Dark Heads will like,
people who maybe aren't blazing the dark heads, forcing the dark heads won't like. I'm generifying to an unbelievable degree there. Obviously we're more split. I'm speaking in generalities, but this is within the game's identity. This is within the game's scope and within what I would identify as ideology. So this is a good inclusion in my book. And remember, this is a tip, so it is actually not strictly a rule. Either saying, hey, have a read. Thrust. Okay. We're going to page 17. We've been shown it here many times. This is in a sense, even though all the rules to do it aren't here, is a 4-page RPG. Starting at 17 and going to 20, really going to 19. No, 19. Penalty move. 20. Rather. In a sense, there is a version of this game that fits on like one bill-folded legal rule piece of paper. And obviously, you wouldn't get this game out of that version of the game, but you could have it as a handy rules reference, right? Now I'm struck by something. Thrust, parry, feint. This is where we actually like talk about them. There's a significant thrust, parry, feint graphic here that grabbed my eye and immediately conveyed what the fuck was up. Right? We're playing rock, paper, scissors. Here's the thing, though. I really like this graphic. But are you gonna repeat 2/3 of the fucking book? The 3/5 of a fucking page graphic twice in a very tight role-playing game? No, the fuck you're not. And that means in the place where the rules actually are for it, we don't have it. And that's one of those dissonances for me in the tyranny of having to fit our ideas and our thoughts into these books, because we can't repeat something when it really makes sense. And we have to cut things which we'd rather not. So, I'm not saying that in a perfect world Jess would put that here. I lament its loss. Thrust beats feint, as it turns out. Thrusting is better than feinting, I guess. Thrust win. The victor has made an offensive move which hit the loser exactly where it hurts. Thrust beats feint but loses to parry. In a thrust win, the victor's narration should describe a physical action and or dialect imposing, biting, or carefully pierces a tender spot, while the loser should demonstrate their hurt. Win example, the victor takes a firm step inwards to which the loser flinches to intimidate to act, or instead, the victor might stab with a cunning insult that causes the loser to become visibly upset. The victor might launch into dazzling retelling of their prowess, marksmanship which loser utterly fails to match. Thrust tie. A thrust tie means that both characters attempt aggressive actions, but the player with priority won by being more imposing. Demonstration of victor prowess more overpowering. Tie example. A firm step inward. Loser which victory overshadows the long stride loses guard, or feeble put down for the loser, which the victor's triumph and the vicious insult. The victor might spin their sword boastfully. Loser attempts to match but fails, dropping his sword entirely. Lamau. The flourish as thrust is a good illustration there in the tie example. Feint. Note that the tie mechanic, which is only going to come up when both parties pick the same option, which is, again, mathematically ain't happening that much, even if experientially it feels like you have a 1/3 chance. You don't. You're much less chance. 2/3 of the subtext under this header is just tie handling. So much so that Perry has to run to the next page. This tells us that ties are a perceived, and in my opinion, correctly perceived, tension point to an extent within the rules and how they can be interpreted, and maybe a lot of that the playtesting feedback that just talked about getting revealed that it was necessary to talk about. Feint when the victor offered provocation or bait and the loser took it. The feint beats parry but loses to thrust. And a feint when the victor hits the loser in an emotional tender spot or took a threatening action which makes them particularly nervous and jumpy. Loser must narrate a significant and vulnerable reaction to the bait, but remember, the victor still reserves the right. That's nice for the turn. Alright. One example. The victor brings up their opponent's embarrassing loss to the last seeded boxer in the first round. The World Tournament caused the loser to lash out defensively. Shut up. I was at the top of my game. It happens. Lay off. We veer back and forth between old examples sometimes to remind us. I like it. It keeps it fresh. Or the victor might bait them into revealing a vulnerable feeling. Also, remember, we've been pointed to skip over to here a few times, and one could skip over to here a few times in theory and just be like, show me the rules. So we're keeping a lot of the old stuff and reminding a lot of the old stuff because this might realistically be where the reading begins. And you're like, oh, a boxer, huh? Huh? They're not killing each other, huh? You know? I don't need Karagen. I already have 2 duelists, huh? So we're accommodating that. You loved me, how pitiful. You loved me, how pitiful. Alternatively, the victor might figure reach for a weapon, cause and loser to overreact. Let's say a step towards the loser, cause them to embarrass and drive backwards. A faint tie indicates both characters attempted to debate a response, but the character with priority didn't fall for it. Winning the turn by responding instead with an even higher stakes ruse, which definitely provokes the loser into losing their cool or revealing something they didn't intend to. Tie example. The loser minimizes the victor's war record, but instead of displaying hurt, the victor names an occasion the loser or the entire squad killed, causing the loser to lash out, while the victor did not. Parry, win. Oh, right, because it goes parry, win example, tie example, and they're just putting it in the box with the thing was like to win there, and like the rest of it, like the examples and shit, like yeah, it's exception handling, but we put it under each thing so that we can okay, we had thrust, categorically it's not here's all the ties, here's all the examples. It's no, we tie them together, we put them in the same section. Parry, win. Loser offered an aggressive thrust, which the victor struck aside to make a powerful counterattack. Parry beats thrust, but loses a feint. At a parry, when the loser must offer the winning player a pitiful insult with the guys lobs for the victor setting up a comeback or imposing a physical move, which the victor can effectively counter. Victor may offer suggestions for the loser's move, or ask the guy to lose to make different thrusts in the counter idea. After the loser's thrust, the victor responds with a counter. Ha ha! This is the collaborative aspect. Strongly here. A counter that can be simple as declining to react to your opponent's provocation. You just like look at them silently, which counts as the characters plays decide together based on narration satisfaction. You can see that with the anonymous of the low info opponent. One example: the loser moved into tower over the victor, but the victor simply stepped back into the loser's guard, causing the loser to falter and stagger back. Maybe the loser ridicules the victor for their meager physique, allowing the victor to counter with the fact that despite this, they still bested the loser in the last 2 matches. Can't even take a win to the mat then. A wrestling example. It might involve the loser drawing their weapon as the victor stands calmly and confidently on, reacting as the loser offs their own parry to provoke. Parry time. Parry tie indicates that the character without priority believes that they have finally spotted an opportunity which to counter. The priority wins the turn by patiently outlasting them, burying the loser's blow to strike their own counterattack. Alternatively, the actions of the character may, without priority, might also be misinterpreted as a thrust, a display of genuine emotion or defensive posturing, misread aggression, which the victor will use may come back and turn the momentum in their favor. Die example: the loser takes a cautious step back, trying to draw the victor close in the trap, but the victor only allows. This is ahead. Bellowing, do you think I'm going to follow you around like a dog? You can fight me on even ground, even if you're not a coward. If you're not a coward. Alternatively, the loser might turn her head away from the victor, with disgust in her face. She interprets this as insult, raising her chin and countering. If you're going to send you, no wonder your whole squad decide they're better off without you in charge. The loser chooses to take the insult passively rather than reveal the truth that she was disgusted with herself for still having feelings for the victor. Drawing your weapon. Characters can draw their weapon at any time. However, if one player reaches 8 points on a turn, their opponent must draw their weapon during that turn's description. Their opponent is close to losing their ground. Losing their control, rather. Soon, the game of Eye of the High Ground will end, and the ensuing battle will begin. Drawing your weapon has no mechanical effect, but it represents a significant narrative escalation. I was going to wonder, like, is it like, does someone get a point when the... No. some would see that as a missed opportunity. I see that as informed by the emotional core of the game and the fact that this is a faltering sign. But it could have been included earlier as just part of the narrative. And it teases out for the resolution. And it's about the story of these things, not the rubric of them. The cape rubric was earlier. Yeah, it encourages it to happen immediately before the climax of the story. Yeah, it repeats a significant narration. Yeah, as I said, it represents significant narrative escalation. This rule ensures that this escalation happens before the game ends and encourages it to happen immediately before the climax of your story. The resolution. When the player reaches 9 points, they win the duel resolves in response to the winning move. The loser is finally compelled to act, and they attempt to strike the first blow. This could be the result of a loss of patience. The necessity of dying. What was in the video? There's enough to say. The loser can act any motivation that feels natural, though they should try to make the decision and satisfy the winner. Loser should narrate this attempted blow, and they can include dialogue. However, the last word goes to the winner. The winner narrates their reaction to the blow and reserves the right to parry or block the loser's strike. The winner may also choose to take that blow, whether to demonstrate how little it affects them or simply because they find it more narratively satisfying. Chef's kiss. If the winner does wish to parry, it can be helpful for them to communicate their intent to do so before the loser narrates the blow. For example, not faux. Like, got an enemy coming in. A mace bounces off the winner's shield. A lightsaber meets the sudden flash of a second saber, locking them together while sparks fly. A bullet is deftly dodged or strikes hidden body armor, or even a personal force field. The end. The first blow struck as part of the resolution ends the game of I have the high ground. If you wish to play out the battle which follows, you can use another role-playing game to tell a story. Alternatively, some players choose to talk out what happens in a freeform manner, collaborating on a high-level summary of how events resolve. Finally, the most common ending, like there's so many excellent stories, leaves room for ambiguity and suspense. Most common ending. We are here suggesting that this is not a side grade game. This is not a collaborative storytelling outside of the game. It's not a writing tool. It is a game in and of itself. It is its own domain where it reigns. The most common ending, like that of so many excellent stories. An aside that speaks to the value and satisfaction found in taking this game on its own and on its own merits in and of itself. Leaves room for ambiguity and suspense. A freeze frame on the first blow with the winner of the duel of posture now decided, but the loser of the ensuing battle left a mystery for the viewer. A penalty move. Represent your character choosing to utterly disrespect about it. You are welcome to interpret what counts as a penalty move flexibly, but those goblet examples and spot real penalties and get offensive. Turn your back to your opponent or intentionally disarm yourself, saying to your brother you do not even consider them a worthy threat to engage with. In this game, turn your back must imply you are physically signaling or verbally decline your intent to walk away from the duel. Similarly, to count as a penalty, you must meaningfully disarm yourself. A primary weapon does not see that signaling your intent to abandon the duel in favor of communication departure. Even attempting to talk it out instead is disrespect. It would imply you do not need the weapon to best them. Such actions are, of course, does mean taking off your gloves if you're boxing. There's lots of interpretation here. Such actions are discourteous and rude. Do you stop at 7-Eleven and start ordering a Slurpee if it's a race? And as such, a penalty of form in a proper duel, but a dramatic moment in any narrative. You grabbing your inches at each other and you're like, oh fuck, you open the door and you realize there's a boba place. Like, I gotta get my boba. Fuck this rival shit. They got the strawberry bursters. They got the blueberry bursters. Fuck me, I want boba now. That's for a game. We can use a penalty move instead of a thrust or feint to parry. When you make a penalty move, roll 2 6-sided dice and compare the result with your current score, then consult the matching section below. If you roll above current score, you fail, and your opponent scores 1 point and has priority next turn, even if they add this turn. If you roll below your current score, you succeed and you score 2 points. If you roll exactly your current score, you fail in an exceptional way, and your opponent both scores a point and may strike a physical blow against you. Oh, shit. And he doesn't know the game. Because it's not losing. Because you just really fucked up that bad. If you roll below your current score, you get 2 points. So this is the only point jump I see. Roll above your current score. So, You want to use this towards the end. It's a point boost. And it's a late game point boost. It encourages you to do it late in the duel, which makes doing it early surprising. Very nice. It dramatically builds. Both players use a move. Here it is. The player with priority rolls their penalty move, and the player without priority retains the ability to make their penalty move later in the game. Not how I would have assumed it was run. Makes sense mechanically, important to include. That's a bit of a narrower line they're sliding in there. This is pedantic bullshit, but I'm not sure if this feels like a sidebox to me. Sidebar to me. I'd sidebar it. Plan to look back and make sure I have. This is good though. It's overall, this is very good. This is good in the sense that it got me to read the information in a very tight form. So cheated subjective. Cheated subjective from that perspective. And mechanically. Result above your current score. If you roll above your current score, your penalty move fails. Your opponent scores 1 point and has priority on the next turn, even if they had it this turn. Oh shit. If this causes them to have priority twice in a row, priority continues alternating this new order. Either way, you incite a response from your opponent with a passion that you provoke. This is an intense retort. You are compelled to turn your back around or retrieve your weapon and display serious vulnerability. Your reaction should surpass the intensity of standard move loss and be at least as fervent as your opponents would have been if your roll had succeeded and your insult had enraged them. Got to be equal stakes equally on the line. You shake, for example, you shake your head and turn around and you heel towards the door, telling your opponent that you aren't even worth killing. They reply, "I've always known you were a coward, but appreciate you finally confirmed it." Or might click a tape recorder, finally revealing that you've been aware of your gut-wrenching admission of guilt since the beginning. Stop halfway through shutting the door, throwing it against the wall. You spin backwards and shout furiously about how you would never know me as what you thought. How dare you think this has changed as you brandish your sword. Your opponent reaches 9 points and wins the game. Okay, this penalty move is integrated into the resolution. Oh. Narrative payoff for mechanical decision to hold on to it towards the end. Your opponent must include an unhesitating attempt to strike. If you disarmed, you must retrieve your weapon and attack, or attack without your primary weapon. For example, you might have stood next to the door, wait for your stillness for a few seconds, then one motion draw your blaster out from your windswept cape, pivot, and fashion is important, and advance on them firing. The opposing player reserves the right, however, decide they've already deployed personal force field, not revealed until the blast bolts fall out fruitlessly. Thus your game ends, the battle begins. Reserves the right. Good way to put it. Because, Jess mentioned, and I don't know if I thanked you for it, but I'd water myself because I kind of think for watering the Lee. This is rolling under priority. These are examples. We're at the end of the book. We're at the end of the 2 hours. Your penalty move fails in an unexpected way. Your opponent scores 1 point priority, alternates by normal rules. It's important that they did all of this penalty resolution because it's sort of the cool extra move you can do in the game. I think it's solid, broadly speaking. Your opponent reaches 9 points and wins the game. Your opponent's response is integrated into resolution. In a typical resolution, the loser strikes the first blow and the victor may block it. When you roll exactly your current score, your opponent strikes the first blow and you cannot block it. Your insult creates dire consequences for you in the battle that follows. For example, your opponent might end the game and begin the battle that follows by instead of leaping onto your catwalk with a screaming roar, igniting her own astro blade and slicing it down over an arc that separates your hand from your arm. Oh, fuck. Yeah, so, they're saying, like, yeah, maybe you disarm them. Haha. Pretty intense. Maybe the first blow, maybe the loser actually fucks you up going into the next fight. I think that's important to keep in mind what the idea of this game is and what the idea of the other games are, and what it in and of itself is. While I have the high ground as a competitive element, players are encouraged to be collaborative. If someone wins a turn, the loser is encouraged to work with the winner to set them up for the victorious moment that they want out of the turn's narration. Important movement on being sporting. In Eye of the High Ground, you're encouraged to play slowly. The first few moves don't even need to contain dialogue. Depending on your character, they may. I sit my cigarette down on the table and look at them sternly. I do not yield. How do they demonstrate the superior position or the refusal to be intimidated? Take your time. Set the scene. Encouragement is to slow down and not think of it as a point battle, despite the fact that, in a sense, it is. If player opts to have a character wear a cape, they are encouraged to describe the motion appearance of their cape as often as possible. No make an advantage, only my underlying respect and gratitude. This is what it's all about, folks. There's always this odd joy that we derive from our games and people playing them. And I think that this game, wearing it on their sleeve rather than back with a cape, shows, in a sense, who just is at the end of the day as a designer, and I like it. This is the back of the billfold blurb. All right, so this has been Eye of the High Ground. We have the itch pinned here. Here are my thoughts. I would like to play the game before I critique it to avoid something called itemless gameplay, although that doesn't apply so much here. But my overall take is good game. To speak in a more substantive fashion, the table of contents sometimes feels like it's prioritizing things that are not on the same level strategically, which is fine and dandy, and you wanted to keep it at a nice readable level and usable. But I'm not going to critique the layout. I'm here to critique the game. The game's good. It is a rock, paper, scissors like with a narrative and story focus. It attempts to guide you. It makes room and allowance for the fact that you may not be easily guided, but the game does have, and I mean this in a value neutral sense, a mother knows best perspective in some instances. But they tend to put it under tips. And, the advice section, you're allowed to throw your weight around. It's how it is. Some people hate a wishy-washy, do it your way, and they need or want a more, do it like this. And at times, the game provides that fairly firmly. I would denumber these, even though it's very fringe. I would denumber these bullet points. Again, that's verging on layout mechanics. The longer cape without going over, feels, it's fun. It's just it's a first turn picker basically, because it's simultaneous resolution, so priority is basically first turn advantage. That's fine. It's fine to do arbitrarily. And it's not arbitrary actually, because it emphasizes the cape, and I think that's nice because it's part of the joy of the game for Jess, and you should not be afraid to put your joy into the game that you hope brings joy to others. It does have a mother's know best perspective, absolutely. Yeah, I didn't mean to swing on it too hard. And I think as designers we can sometimes be harsher on ourselves for see it more firmly. I think it's fine. At the end of the day, particularly if you're inclined to play a story game, I feel, I'm generalizing here, you're willing to go off the rails. I think you provided the loose railing on the edge of a perilous cape where your people are racing and they might go careening off the edge into the rocks at any moment. Just fine. But yeah, we're here at 2:13. Yeah, I just sometimes in tabletop role playing game discussions, there's a tendency to be and this is bad because, and it's really, dog, you're talking about your personal preferences. And maybe I'm, wild to imagine there is a value neutral perspective or obviously some of the things I've mentioned there to my taste. But overall, I Have the High Ground is worth checking out. It's on Itch. It's on Itch.io. Wherever this VOD winds up, by which I mean I know where it is. It'll be on our VOD's channel. Diesel Shot. And there is another channel, Diesel Shot Final Cut. That is for prepared videos. This will be a VOD. We're looking to do this probably every Sunday. Reign of Roses, a long-form campaign I've been playing for 5 years, which literally begins with the characters being born. It's already had a prequel book that's run with summaries on. Final Cut is starting. It starts from birth with their dad, who's already played his character a bit. being there, and I think that it's going to be a really fun game, and I encourage you to come by. It's going to be Sundays. We will begin to, however we're screening it around, we will flow from Indie TTRPG Carousel to Reign of Roses fairly tightly. So, if you've got a fairly unbooked Sunday through, noonish, 11 a.m.ish through 6 p.m. Eastern, Sundays could be Digital Store Extravaganza Day. Please check out at Jess from Online in the various good places you can find Jess, and find Lee on the net. I should have made a Jess from Online command. I didn't. Apologies, Jess. How am I not following Jess from Online? Fixed. Go follow Jess from Online like I just did, and very cool game. Oh, you've tweeted about it. We'll examine this another time. Very fun game. I say I haven't played it. I think it's neat. I am going to slide out on a raid. And it's been cool to have you. It's been a pleasure, Jess, and Kid Canine and Lerb. I'm glad you got to see this, as well as other viewers. It's fun. RPG Clinic is live with Avatar Legends, the Mirror Scale. And, let's have an Avatar Legend. Go here. Here, 5 viewers. Take 5 viewers. Go see a Star Wars. I'm going to kill time here for a moment, because the raid's going to cut the end of the VOD. But, yeah. Peace.